Hello, once again. We are back for part 7, recorded at the same time as part 6, but the video files get so massive that they literally crash my editing software, so I need to just split these up. Alright, we're on to chapter 22. 21 took quite a while, for there were many errors and many legal technicalities to get over. But we are into a new dawn. We are into the year of hardware, whatever that means. So,
Richard's one of my characters,
yeah.
but someone else can take Don.
Dale, you're Don.
Nobody, including me, thought the Game Boy would take off like it did. Game Boy is the most perfect example in the industry. You can't be sure about anything, and any that I had doubts about Game Boy too.
Nintendo was extremely dismissive about Sega. I think there was some concern about Genesis, but they were generally very dismissive. The feeling at Nintendo always was that Sega was kind of a second-class outfit.
There's always I would one of the reasons I would love to see some stuff inside NOA is to see how much they really considered Sega, because there's a lot of Sega fans, I think, say like Nintendo did certain things specifically to trounce Sega, but
Right.
like if you look at a lot of their actions, they really did not seem to regard Sega like at all.
I really don't. Yeah, exactly. I really don't think they did. And the 90s are different, but in the 80s, they were pals because Bruce Lowry was really Nintendo through and through. And so he didn't want to fight Nintendo. And so they didn't have to regard Sega as anything because Lowry didn't do the stuff that would allow them to be competitive. He specifically didn't want to get in a price war with them. So he didn't.
But there's Tonka, and then there's, the beginnings of SOA. Like, I remember, like, Carl in some of his early episodes were saying, Nintendo announced this thing because they knew Sega was announcing something similar. I'm like, I'm not sure they gave a goddamn crap at all.
No, I think Nintendo just did what Nintendo wanted to do. Look, Nintendo's always just done what Nintendo's wanted to do.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's worked for them and sometimes it hasn't. But they've almost never done anything because somebody else was doing it in that sense,
A part of society. Oh my god, they live in a society. Oh no.
Oh dear.
By 1989, Nintendo would become a regular fixture in the news. The media reported on the company's phenomenal record sales and press events, and sometimes covered curious anecdotes associated with the company. The hands-free controller, developed by Nintendo engineers to enable quadriplegics to play games, earned the company print and broadcast attention. Actually, the first quadriplegic controller was for the Studio 2.
Right.
Yeah. I always like trying that out because it's a minor interest of mine of just disabled gamer controllers. I think they're interesting. Microsoft's kind of gone the full mile there with that huge promotion of the whatever that controller is called. But
yeah, I know what you're talking about, but
yeah.
I don't have the name off the top of my head.
To use this special controller, players rested their chins on a lever that worked like a steering device. A tube running from the controller to their mouths replaced the A and B buttons. A button functions were accessed by blowing the straw, and B functions were accessed by sipping. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a great method. Especially if you're doing like Mario or something. You can't press both at once.
Exactly. And it's really by sucking, not sipping. That makes it sound like you're drinking something to make it work when you say they're sipping.
I think he purposely didn't want to say sucking, but anyways. The press also covered humorous human interest stories, such as an incident involving a burglar who noticed a Nintendo Entertainment System and couldn't resist trying it. Somebody noticed the criminal and reported him to the police. On arrival, the police found the burglar in front of the television playing a game.
We should try to find that one at newspapers.com.
Yeah, I've seen this reference before, so I think it's legit. But
no, I think it's legit too. I'd just be interested in seeing the article.
This story has been confirmed by people who worked for Nintendo at the time, though the details may be exaggerated. In another story, a bomb squad blew up an NES on the runway of Los Angeles International Airport. Airport security officers x-rayed the NES inside a suitcase, unable to identify it, called the bomb squad. Figuring an unfamiliar object to be a bomb, the police detonated it.
I was quoted in USA Today on the front page that day or the next day, and something to the effect of, well, we know we have a great product, but people don't usually get quite such a bang out of it.
Oh man.
Beautiful.
How many
That's what a
copies do
PR
you think
person
he
does.
bought? 30. He easily picked up.
This is
30,
just
so.
as good as the Sonic Macy Day Parade thing they had to come up with. That Sonic was just too fast. Unauthorized and never sued. Nintendo guarded against unlicensed companies making unauthorized NES, Game Boy, and Super NES cartridges, but an Arizona-based company, Wisdom Tree, slipped through its net unchallenged. I'm not sure this is true, but that's one of these things where I'm trying to get access on Pacer, and then I can start looking at these things.
Right.
Because, just because you don't know about the suit doesn't mean that there wasn't a suit.
Right.
Wisdom Tree was an offshoot of Color Dreams, a company founded by U.S. engineers who reverse engineered the NES and found a way around the lockup chip. Using this technology, Color Dreams published games such as King Neptune's Adventure, Pesterminator, and Metal Fighter. One of the company's titles, Menace Beach, featured material considered highly risque by NES standards. The goal of the game was to help a hero rescue his kidnapped girlfriend. Pictures of the chained-up woman were flashed out through the game, and she had on less clothing in every shot. In the beginning, she wore a blouse and a skirt. By the end of the game, she was in a bikini. Menace Beach was far tamer than Peekaboo Poker, Bubble Bath Babes, and Hot Slots, 3 unlicensed games published by the Taiwanese software company Panasonic, which featured anime-style drawings of naked women. But they weren't released in the US, so why the hell are you talking about them? There were plenty of porno NES clone games, but yeah, it's not important to talk about.
Yes.
Unless you're Frank, and then you have the crusade of making sure that everything NES is canonical NES. In 1989, Color Dreams spun off Wisdom Tree, a company that made NES games with Christian themes. I have a feeling it was just a label, but I honestly don't know. So
that would be my guess, but yeah.
Yeah. For the most part, Wisdom Tree games were fairly indistinguishable from other video games and had some basic side-scrolling, object-finding, enemy-shooting gameplay. Some of the games had biblical trivia quizzes between rounds, and the themes of the games were adapted to convey biblical ideas. Wisdom Tree's first game, Bible Adventures, was released in December 1990. After a slow start, the company sold approximately 350,000 copies. Basically, what we were doing was taking the garbage out and putting Bible content in, which was still garbage. The whole reason for the company to begin with. We marketed almost 100% to the Christian bookstore market, not through secular channels. It took a while to get in. We got picked up by Focus on the Family, which gave us pretty much of an industry okay. Gave us pretty much of an industry okay, I think is how that should be structured.
Exactly. They learned the secret handshake.
Wisdom Tree eventually published 7 NES games, along with 4 games for Game Boy, 3 for Sega Genesis, and 1 for the Super NES. All right, well,
the Super
trivia.
NES is the Doom clone, right?
Yeah.
Where you feed the animals for Noah's Ark.
Super Noah's Ark 3D.
Yeah.
2 of Wisdom Tree's Nintendo Game Boy cartridges were not really games. The company published cartridges containing the text of the King James and New International versions of the Bible. Yep, but I don't even know why you're going into all this. This doesn't make... Is there a point to this, Kent?
Well, I happened to interview somebody from the company, so it's in the book now.
The company's library included several original games published by outside contractors, a couple of cosmetically altered Color Dreams games. Sunday Fun Day, for instance, was a thinly disguised version of Menace Beach. While the owners of Wisdom Tree were openly Christian, their game designers do not necessarily share their beliefs. People who later worked with the man who programmed Bible Adventures say that after a working day and night on the project, he went to Las Vegas and blew his earnings in less than a week.
Because people affiliated with large Christian organizations have never gambled in Vegas or done other non-Christian things. That's a whole nother stream.
Yeah, I mean,
they're good boys.
All the time,
They're
virtuous.
Good, they're good law-abiding plumbers. They're good.
Wisdom Tree presented Nintendo with a prickly situation. The general public did not seem to pay close attention to court battles with Atari games, and industry analysts were impressed with Nintendo's legal acumen, but going after a tiny company that published innocuous religious games was another story. In 1994, Wisdom Tree tested Nintendo's ability to turn the other cheek by licensing the mazes and code to a game called Castle Wolfenstein 3D.
It wasn't called Castle Wolfenstein 3D.
And I don't think... And
I love how he says, a game called, like it was this obscure little thing they plucked out of nowhere.
And they licensed the mazes. I know that it's not just a reskin. They used the code to make a new game.
Yeah.
So... This was one of the few unlicensed games to appear on the Super NES. In Wolfenstein 3D, players ran through dungeons killing Nazi soldiers and guard dogs as they hunted for Hitler. In Super 3D Noah's Ark...
Wait. That is incorrect as it pertains to the Super NES version of the game, where the dogs were replaced by giant rats. Because of Nintendo's licensing standards.
Yeah, but they're not referring to the it's not referring to the Super NES version. It just says in this game, players ran through dungeons. Yeah.
And there's only one particular scenario where you're hunting for Hitler. That's not actually what you're doing in most of the game.
Oh, you're getting to the end, killing him. I'm letting that go. It's fine. And it's Mecha Hitler, but whatever. In Super 3D Noah's Ark, which featured the exact same maze... No, it's not. I'm almost certain of this. I'll put this as a question mark, but I'm almost certain this is not the same.
I've not done the research, so I can't comment on it.
Players shot food at little goats that had escaped from their pens.
Do we have any of the stories behind like the line of thought when they licensed Doom to the Christian developers?
I mean, there is I don't know where this rumor comes from, but supposedly they did this because they wanted to get back at Nintendo.
That's funny.
There's a rumor that id was mad at Nintendo and they licensed the engine for Super Noah's Ark 3D just to piss off Nintendo. But I don't know. I don't know who corroborated
It sounds
that.
like something a bunch of stoned people with money would in that period of time just be laughing their ass off about.
The game was built into a special adapter that attached to any licensed NES cartridge. The chip in the licensed cartridge would disable the security chip, allowing the Super Nintendo to read the game. Ignoring Wisdom Tree was the only logical course of action. Super Noah's Ark 3D was released towards the end of the 16-bit generation, as growing numbers of players began using computers to play games. Okay. I mean, that's true, but, like...
Not in relation to the total number of people playing console games, though.
Yeah. And I think it was, like, 1994, so it's not like it was 95 or 96 or anything like that.
Yeah.
Though Wisdom Tree was one of the last companies to manufacture and sell NES and Super NES games, the company's focus eventually turned to publishing games for PCs. It's much easier. The return of Sega. One of my first jobs here was to take the Master System back from Tonka and bring it over to Sega. Then we closed
I'm
out...
not sure why you're allowed to read Paul Ryu. Never interviewed him.
I did it before, that's why. I call the shots.
Continue.
Then we closed down a lot of the development. We did not have the money to do anything big. Our main focus of 1989 and 1990 was obviously Genesis. We closed down what development? What? The only things that Tonka did was just like, they had Parker Brothers do some publishing for them, but like, he's saying we took back the Master System, and then we closed down the development. Development of what?
They didn't even care about Parker Brothers doing it. It was Tom Dusenberry that was like, we've got this thing, maybe we should do some games for it. And they were basically like, whatever, dude. I mean, we're not going to support you in any way, but go do it. Whatever.
That seems to line up with the attitude that Don Reisinger told me about.
Yeah, because I did ask Tom Dusenberry about Parker Brothers and the Master System, because he was in charge of that, and that's basically what he said about it.
Yeah, I don't know what development you were closing down, but whatever. Paul Ryu was there in the Cats days, obviously, but I guess if he was there.
He was there very early. He predated Cats, I'm pretty sure. He was there in '89 sometimes, like he says here. He was very early.
Did he predate Nilsson, though? That's the real question.
Let me see if I have anything. I don't know if I do or not. This will only take a moment.
Sega's alliance with Tonka did not prove completely satisfactory for either company. Despite its strong toy distribution network and very generous advertising campaign, the Minnesota Toy Truck Company sold considerably less than 1 million Master System game consoles in 2 years. When the contract expired, Sega quit.
That may be formatting.
I know.
They were more than it. I know they were more than a toy truck company. I mean, just because that's how they started.
They had GoBots.
They owned. Yes, they owned Kenner Parker at that point. I mean,
when the contract expired, Sega quietly took back the system and inherited large inventories of unsold games and consoles and cartridges. Clearing out the Master System inventory was not a major priority at the time. Sega had spent the last 2 years developing a powerful new game console that had twice the processing power of the NES/Famicom, and the product was finally ready for release in Japan.
Here we go. I have an art. So it was the very end of the. I mean, so like when the press picks up on it, could be later than it actually happened. But there was an article in the Japan Economic Journal that I have, December 16th, 1989. Reporting that Sega has hired Michael Katz and Paul Ryu.
Okay. So probably around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But, yes, it's not twice the processing power. That's not what bits are.
Yeah.
I hate people trying to use the bits argument. You've been corrupted by marketers.
It is twice the channels to the CPU. It is not twice the processing power.
Yeah. I'm going to call that an error just because I'm so spiteful about it.
It's because you hate it all.
Really, you should be counting it in megahertz if you're talking about processing power. Sega's new system called the Mega Drive with a dash? The Mega Drive?
Yeah, no.
Calling it out on that one. Featured an impressive array of hardware, was built around the 16-bit Motorola 68,000 processing chip, the same chip that Apple used to power the Macintosh computer. This chip could process twice as much data per cycle as the 8-bit MOS technology 6502 chip Nintendo used in the Famicom. So he literally says he does not understand. That's just... The Mega Drive had a 512 color palette that can display as many as 64 colors on screen at any time, compared to the NES's 52 color palette. The Mega Drive had a separate 8-bit processor for sound. Well, it wasn't just for sound. It was
mostly there for backwards compatibility, and because it was there, they might as well run the sound through it.
Right. I don't call that an error, though.
I wouldn't. It is true that the Z80 ran the sound.
All of the power translated into games with larger and more detailed characters, more complex graphics, faster action, and a game console that would compete with coin-operated game machines in the arcades. Not by that time, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no.
With its headquarters in Tokyo, Sega Enterprises had the infrastructure needed to market the Mega Drive in Japan. Bringing the system to the United States was another story. Hayao Nakayama, CEO of Sega Enterprises, and David Rosen, the chairman, had already experienced the problem...
David Rosen was not the chairman of Sega Enterprises. He was the chairman of Sega of America. Isao Okawa was the chairman of Sega Enterprises.
Had already experienced the problems of launching a game console through a small startup operation. Nintendo, a company that had only recently entered the home video game market in the United States, had completely smothered the Master System out of the market by 1988. Attaching itself to Tonka, a strong company that knew little about the game business, also failed.
And it wasn't a strong company at that point. It was
Yeah.
dying, which is why Hasbro got it for nothing.
And an interesting twist. Rosen decided to enlist the same company that Nintendo had tried to enlist before launching the NES, Atari Corporation.
Dave Rosen came to Atari and asked if we'd be interested in taking over the manufacturing, marketing, and distribution of Genesis. We came very close to making a hefty licensing deal so that Atari could jump into the 16-bit fray before Nintendo. The negotiations went pretty far down the stream, and as I recall, they fell apart when Jack and Dave Rosen couldn't agree to the terms. Then Sega decided to do it themselves.
Everybody's expert. Video game companies have a certain incestuous relationship.
Ooh, how titillating! How positively decadent!
And it is not uncommon for top employees to take jobs with their competitors. I mean, it is very interlinked, and that's one of the awesome things about video game history.
Yes.
Bruce Lowry, for instance, resigned his job as Nintendo Vice President of Sales to become President of Sega of America. When he left Sega, he moved to Europe to help Ron Judy run Nintendo of Europe. But of the many job shifters in the industry, few have had the illustrious career as Michael Katz. Yes.
Dun, dun, dun.
In the late 1970s, Katz, as a marketing director at Mattel, oversaw the creation of the first handheld electronic games. From there, he moved to Connecticut to become...
I see how you just kind of changed that there.
What did it say?
First handheld video games.
First handheld video... What? Okay, yeah. Whatever.
There. Yes.
I'm fine with it. From there, he moved to Connecticut to become vice president of marketing for Coleco. I think we did this already.
Yeah, even though he is occasionally in the trades called VP of Marketing, I think it was Marketing Communications. I don't think he was actually VP of Marketing.
After 5 years at Coleco, he received an intriguing phone call.
I was contacted by headhunters representing some venture capitalists and told about a company named Epix, which they described as a 1.5 million computer game company losing $400,000 a year in Sunnyvale. I was anxious to get back to California, where my two kids lived. I hadn't lived in San Francisco for about 7 or 8 years, and my goal was to get back there. I didn't know anything about Epix, and I had never heard of a venture capitalist. I liked the fact that I was being offered a CEO slot and some stock in a startup, but I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to do something risky like that. I had to make the decision on a January night in Connecticut. I was trying to get a fire started in my fireplace, and it wouldn't start. As I was leafing through a computer game magazine, I came upon an Epix ad. Just as I turned the page and discovered it, this flame burst in the fireplace. It was a complete coincidence. The fire that I had been trying to start burst into a flame, so I considered that a divine message that Epix was where I should go.
And he tells the story verbatim. every interview.
He told it to me.
Told it to Carl. Told it to other people. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the same thing all the time. He has his narrative, and he will not deviate. And it even might be true. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't think he doesn't strike me as a deliberate, which isn't, I mean, that could just mean he's good at hiding it, but he's never struck me as a deliberate huckster.
Though he does think highly of himself.
Well, of course he does. And I do wonder about his link in the chain of the handheld games, but...
Katz became the president of Epix in February 1983 and changed the company's entire focus. The company had severe financial problems and only had enough cash to maintain operations for approximately 6 months. Under Katz's direction, the company created 3 new product lines and hired Chiat Day, the same advertising company that handled Apple Computer. Another of Epic...
Okay, I gotta be pedantic here. Isn't it Chiat/Day? Isn't it?
Is it?
Maybe not. Maybe I'm full of it this time.
it
No, it's
seems to-
Chiat/Day. I thought it
Backslash
was. Yes, /Day. It's Chiat/Day. That's part of their branding.
Another of Epic's new directions was the acquisition of outside software developer StarPath, which was led by Bob Brown, one of the engineers involved in the creation of the Atari 2600. I mean, he oversaw, but you know,
He was but he was a manager.
he was involved, quote unquote.
He was involved. I agree.
StarPath had abandoned a project based on the Olympic Games. With the real Olympics only a year away, Katz let the company finish the project.
Okay, hold everything. So they had done Sweat, abandoned Sweat. Summer Games was a completely new from-scratch game. They did not finish Sweat to create Summer Games.
Sweat.
They didn't break a sweat. Or did they?
They did break Sweat. That's why they needed Summer Games. Yeah. I mean, obviously they had done that before, and that helped inspire their direction, but we have interviews with the people. It was not just, let's take Sweat and finish it.
Summer Games released in 1984 and was followed up in 1985 with the sequel Winter Games. Over the following years, as these thematic games titles became Epic's signature series and included a tremendously popular product called California Games. I don't know why everyone focuses on California Games, but it always
totally
comes up.
Tubular, man.
I talked to the
His
producer
hacky sack. Yes.
of
Matt
California
Householder.
Games. Yes, he is very proud of it, but I don't know if it's really that unique. But
Yeah.
good on you.
I've not
Matt.
interviewed him, but he comes across as such a nice guy in every interview I read.
Oh yeah, he was so nice. He was, and even if I've messaged him a little bit since, and yeah, he's always willing to just give up any information that he's got.
Yep, that's awesome.
Very, very nice guy. Shout out to Matt Householder. Katz's biggest interest, however, was in marketing hardware, not software. No, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is all off, and there is a block quote, I think, coming up where Katz talks about being made aware of the thing, but they didn't approach Katz in '86. They got Morse made president of the company, and then Morse brought in Michael and Needle to do the thing.
When 2 inventors named R.J. Michael and Dave Needle approached Epix in 1986 with a design for a color handheld video game, Katz urged the board to adopt the project, which later became the Atari Lynx. Epix events...
Actually, there isn't a block quote, so I think there may be a block quote where he mentions it later. I think he had mentioned some involvement, but it doesn't make sense because the info we have elsewhere makes it pretty clear that they were looking for a company that they could do this with, and so Morse, Michael, and Needle, and so Morse got himself embedded and then brought them on to do the thing.
Right. Urged the board to adopt the project, which later became the Atari Lynx. Epix eventually did work with Michael and Needle, but at that time Jack and Sam Trammell had already learned Katz to accept a position at Atari Corporation.
I had lunch with Jack and Sam Trammell one day, and they said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to form an entertainment electronics division at Atari."
Wow, what a specific and coincidental thing that you bring up to the owners of Atari.
I want to bring back video games, and that can help fund the new division. It can also fund the ST computer, which was what Jack and Sam were all excited about. So they said, you can become president of the Entertainment Electronics Division if you also become president of the Video Game Division and become head of sales and marketing for the Computer Division. I said that sounded fair. So in one lunch, which is what Jack and Sam are like, we made a deal. I got a new job and became head of the Video Game Division, which in Jack's mind had the main objective of getting a lot of profits so that the company could develop the ST computer.
Katz moved to Atari in 1986 and oversaw the re-release of the. He has the thing, information about.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah.
Of the Atari 7800 game console. Unlike the Master System, the 7800 was not meant to compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System head-on. Also, I think he came in later than the release of the 7800.
I'm not sure, but I do know. Let me look when he joined, because I do have that. I know that you can look in the Atari timelines too, current stuff, and you can do that. I'm looking through my articles because I think I have the article when he was. Yes, I do have an article. November 26, 1985, the New York Times reported that Michael V. Katz joined the company. So he was there for the...
Yeah, okay. That is just fine then.
But, no, it's not just fine because we have an error.
Where's the error? Am I not there yet?
Go back one page. Katz moved to Atari in 1986? No. 1985. And so here's the thing, both of us know a lot about video game history. So between the two of us, we have a lot of facts just in our heads. Plus, we have a lot of things that we know kind of generally, like maybe we should look this up. We're finding all of these. We're not fact-checking every last thing Kent says. There are probably like little things like dates and revenue figures and whatnot that we're not even bothering to check that are probably also wrong.
Right. Don't ever go to Kent. I mean, for a lot of things, but don't ever go to Kent for a figure. That would be terrible. Do not take this $30 million figure or whatever from Kent. Go find a source that actually tells you, because he's not systematically laid out. All the money and stuff like that's. You have to find that yourself. Unlike the Master System, the 7800 was not meant to compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System head-on. Atari introduced it as a low-end alternative system that sold for $30 less than its competitors. Oh, $30. I know that was worth more back then.
Yeah, I disagree with this. I think...
mediocre even then.
The 2600 is the one they marketed as the system for people that couldn't afford anything else. The 7800 was meant to compete with the NES head-on, and their way of competing with the NES, the marketing strategy, was to emphasize that it was cheaper.
The 7800 barely dented Nintendo's billion-dollar market, but it contributed to Atari's best year since the fall of 1982. I mean, it's not the same company, but okay.
Yeah, right.
In 1988, Atari reached $452 million in revenue.
We brought back Atari video games as the low price spread for 3 or 4 years and made a hell of a lot of profit. As I recall, we made about $80 million of profit over that period. We brought back the 7800. We needed software for it, but of course this was the period when Nintendo created the market again in the US, and Nintendo had a lock on all the hot arcade titles. Nobody else, whether it be Atari or Sega or anyone, could get the hot arcade titles because Nintendo had exclusives. Hey, Commando and Double Dragon appeared on the Atari 2600. It occurred to me that the standard for the last few years had not been arcade games. There was a core group of computer gamers who knew all the hot computer games. So I went to those companies who were just doing computer format. I went to Doug Carlston at Broderbund, to Ken Williams at Sierra, to Gilman Louie at Spectrum Holobyte. Yeah, that may be in the thing here. I'll look that one up. I've got print.
Yep.
Because some of this I'm not sure whether it's formatting or if it's actually... It'll only take me a second to get back there.
Chapter 22.
Yep, I'm in the chapter. I'm just too far ahead in it. Here we are, I think. Yes. Nope, it's a typo in the original. Yay! To Ken Williams at Sierra, to Gilman Louie at Spectrum Holobyte, and to Alan Miller at Accolade, and asked if we could license games like Hardball and Load Runner.
Yeah, Kurt, it had been standard for the last few years and not been a kid games. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but
It means the computer games are just better. Clearly.
Obviously.
Cats was part of the PC Master Race before we even knew what that was.
But there was no PC.
Details.
By the beginning of 1989, Katz needed a break from work. He had not taken a 2-week vacation since graduating from college in 1967, and the Trammels were notorious for placing high expectations on their executives. Tired and needing time to decide what he wanted to do with the rest of his life, Katz left Atari Corporation and spent the next 3 months traveling around the world. While he was gone, Sega released the American version of the Mega Drive. It was called Genesis. Sega of America launched Genesis in 2 markets, Los Angeles and New York, on August 14, 1989. This console sold for $189 and came out with a single controller and the game Altered Best. There were 5 additional games available at launch: Thunder Force, Time of the Sword of Baseball, Super Thunderblade, Space Harrier, and Last Battle.
Space Harrier 2.
Space Harrier 2, okay.
And
Space
I have
Harrier
no
2.
idea if any of that launch information is accurate. Well, I mean, I know it was packaged with Altered Beast, but...
I will put this as a question for later.
Yeah, I mean, they may be right. I'm just saying, I do not have independent confirmation, and I don't trust this guy.
Well, there is actually a guy who covered this on the YouTubes. So let us look up Classic Gaming Quarterly. He does videos.
Computer Entertainer might have something too. While you do that, I will delve into Computer Entertainer.
So he does videos on the launch of all the major consoles. So yeah, launch. Okay, Last Battle, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade.
It's supposed to be August, right? So let me see.
I think it says Thunder. It looks like it says Thunder Force 2, but I can't read it. Where's it at?
Oh, hi, Steve Hanawa.
I need to talk to him. There are things.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Steve showed us the impressive graphics and sound kit with. Okay,
it's Thunder Force 2.
It is Thunder Force 2. I've got confirmation on that in Computer Entertainer as well. Let me see what we're... Yeah. I don't have... But this is not quite reporting on the launch yet in this issue, which makes sense because it's the August issue.
Everything else seems to be accurate according to CGQ.
But this is, yeah, and I'm just going to see what Computer Entertainer said at the time. But this is why, I mean, we're not even checking all of Kent. If we did that, this would take 5 times as long. And I know we're just missing things that he got wrong because we didn't bother to.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't corrected every typo, but just the ones I found particularly maddening. A second wave of games arrived 1 month later. As the game that came with the console, Altered Beast played an important role in convincing consumers about the power of Genesis's 16-bit processor. NES games generally had smaller characters, occupying only a limited area of any.
Okay, so it was launched in New York and Los Angeles. Sorry, I'm just still looking. It was launched in New York and Los Angeles. That's true, but this article doesn't mention all the launch games yet. See if this does. Okay, here we go. Yes, so Last Battle, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade, Thunder Force 2, Tommy Lasorda Baseball. That's what we have, right? I mean, Altered Beast isn't listed because it's bundled.
It's all correct, so he got it right.
Yep. Other than, yeah. But Kent missed a 2. Kent missed a 2.
The shape-shifting hero of Altered Beast was nearly half as tall as the screen and had recognizable facial features. The snakes, wolves, enemy sorcerers, and other creatures that attacked him were also large and clearly drawn. In size, gameplay, and graphics, the Genesis version of Altered Beast was amazingly similar to the arcade game on which it was based. Unfortunately, it's not good.
Yeah.
I was like there was this Konami beat 'em up that was kind of like a ripoff of Altered Beast. It's like Metamorphosis or something like that. I was playing that in Aurora over at the arcade that I went to. It was decently fun. I mean, all beat 'em ups are the same. I really
Right.
I see no
But-
like my two classics were Golden Axe and Final
Yes.
Fight.
Those are my two classics as well, for sure.
And I don't need anything beyond that. Like none of the other ones give me anything
Well, I mean, of
else.
course, the problem with Altered Beast is it's not on that like isometric playing field, so you're just walking forward. It's terrible.
And the moves are like they're just so limited, and like you don't have a lot of space to move around because your character's so goddamn big.
But then they did Golden Axe, and all was forgiven.
True. In October, as the Genesis market expanded from New York and Los Angeles to a nationwide campaign, Sega of America announced the hiring of a new president and CEO, Michael Katz.
Dave Rosen asked me if I wanted to come to Sega and become president, so I joined Sega in October of 1989 and spent a year. And every day, the chant that I was supposed to be saying and our troops were supposed to be saying was Hyakuman, which means 1,000,000 units in Japanese, because Nakayama felt we should be selling 1,000,000 units. We had to differentiate ourselves from Nintendo, and once again, we couldn't get hot properties from the arcades other than Sega's own arcade titles. Just like it was at Atari, it became a matter of figuring out a way to position ourselves strongly when we couldn't get the hottest arcade titles. So we decided to get the hottest personalities instead.
As the head of Sega, Katz's first goal was to establish an identity for Genesis. The marketing team came up with a two-part approach. On the one hand, team members needed to demonstrate the superiority of Genesis over the NES. They needed to show that Genesis games had better graphics and sound and looked more like arcade games. Realizing that most consumers were more interested in games than technology, Katz's team members did not want to focus too heavily on the 16-bit processor.
It's right there in the Genesis Does commercial.
16-bit arcade graphics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I call bullshit.
Instead of reciting technological achievements, they developed an advertising campaign that challenged Nintendo head-on. Sega's new marketing mantra was, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Sega came out slamming us in their commercials. They were naming us by name, and that was really a big deal. It's like calling somebody calling your team crap. We took it in good-natured and competed the best we could. The second part of Katz's marketing rollout was to circumvent the lack of arcade properties by creating a library of instantly recognizable titles. Nintendo could dominate the arcade translation business. Sega, meanwhile, would contact athletes and celebrities to create games with their names and images. You mean create games and then put a celebrity on it. That's what you mean. Under Katz's direction, Sega created Pat Riley's baseball, Arnold Palmer golf,
Basketball.
Pat Riley's basketball, Arnold Palmer golf, Buster Douglas boxing, and Joe Montana football.
Joe Montana became the ultimate example. We paid $1.7 million up front. I fought to convince Nakayama and the Japanese that we needed Montana, and I gave Joe Montana the check. We also had Michael Jackson, we had Pat Riley, and we had Tommy Lasorda. Buster Douglas was my selection too. He got knocked down in his first challenge after he won the championship, but that was okay because the royalty was on a sliding scale, and that meant we didn't have to pay as much. He gave up the title right after he had gotten it.
Now, isn't in Console Wars, don't they say that this was a Kalinsky thing too?
They might have. And of
I
course
remember. I remember the story. The story is that they're like at CES or something, or maybe that. But they like watch the his loss.
Well, no.
And then
Well, no. That was Arakawa and Tyson.
no, in
Well, but
in
the
console.
story about watching at CES.
Yeah, that's why I said. That's why I rescinded what I was saying.
Oh,
But
okay,
the-
okay, I got you.
Yeah, and
I
we did that part, but like I remember in Console Wars, they're watching the Buster Douglas fight, and then he loses the championship, and then, you know.
Well, I mean,
they
it
had to
might
put
be
out the game
Klinsky was there
anyway.
by the time he lost the championship. So let's see when that
All
happens
right,
on Autobots
here we
Universe.
go. So let's see. I'll look up Buster Douglas, and you look up when Klinsky came to Sega.
Okay, that's fair.
We will split the duty. February 23rd, 1990. So I'm pretty sure that was
Because I don't even have to look up.
Yeah.
Klinsky was 91, so.
So yep, that's another false story told by Console Wars. That is just giving everything over to Kalinske and not really acknowledging Katz's role.
Oh,
in
so actually,
setting
it
up
was
this.
1990, but it was October
Oh,
of 1990.
what does this say on goddamn Wikipedia? Oh, okay, so that's the wrong thing. Yeah, October. Okay, so now, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I have an article, the Business Wire. So that they issued a press release October 8th, 1990, announcing the hiring of Kalinske.
Okay, so it was all right. All right, sorry, sorry to oh, what's his name?
Blake Harris.
Blake Harris. Apologies to Blake Harris, but you did make up the whole Electronic Arts thing, and I'm not going to forgive
my
you.
razors.
Oh, my favorite. Shortly after starting at Sega, Katz convinced Nakayama to sign a 5-year agreement with 49er quarterback Joe Montana. Yeah, what he just said in the quote up there. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks, kid.
right.
The deal enabled Sega to use Montana's name and image in a football game. Once the license deal was signed, the next problem was finding the game itself. Sega did not have a large U.S. game production facility at the time. They didn't have any game production facility. They were working on it.
Yeah.
And Sega of Japan had not designed a football game. By coincidence, a small software company, Mediagenic,
I mean, smaller than Nintendo.
had a game under development. Okay, what does it say?
What's he going to say wrong about this?
The company was formerly known as Activision. Okay.
Yes. But I like it.
Okay.
It doesn't explain at all about He talks about the founding of Activision. He doesn't explain at all the whole Mediagenic thing. He's just like a small software company, Mediagenic, which we've never mentioned before, but we actually have. But don't worry about it.
According to
Yeah.
the team that worked on the project, the game was approximately 30% finished, but Mediagenic executives said that it could be finished by October or November at the very latest, so Katz decided to purchase the game.
We didn't know about all the internal turmoil that was going on at Mediagenic. Basically, they deceived us over a period of 4 or 5 months that the game was proceeding on schedule. We, Sega, were naive and irresponsible. We should have known. The game wasn't very far along at all, but we didn't discover that till about September or October. By the time we found out, the only way we were going to get a game out near Christmas would be to find another game that was either mostly finished or completely finished and convert it.
In desperation, Sega turned to Electronic Arts, one of its first American licensees. Well known for its licensees. Yeah, that's a way to say it.
They weren't licensees yet.
Well, I don't know when the whole... Like, I remember that there is an announcement of Electronic Arts becoming a licensee.
Well, yeah, but I think it's wrapped up in the whole Montana thing. But, this is what we do.
Yep.
Let me see.
This is what we're cursed to do.
Let me see what I can figure out here.
So they had worked out the deal before they needed Joe Montana, because that's why they went to them.
Well, I thought that because they needed them was part of the reason that they were more amenable to working out a deal.
I always got the impression that it was that they were already wrapped up, and then they decided to go, uh, because they needed this desperate play.
Let's see if I have anything that can throw light on any of this whatsoever.
Remember, kids, always organize your sources.
My sources are organized. Plus, they're keyword searchable.
I'm slowly getting things into Zotero, but it takes a lot of time, so...
Yeah. My sources are organized, they're just not meant to, like, in 2 seconds necessarily find something.
Then what is the point, Alex?
But they're quite organized.
Sorry we're leaving you hanging. This is active research, not active television. Well, it was definitely by June, by the thing that I just found. Yeah, they never released anything that was unauthorized. So, yeah, June.
No, I know they didn't release anything that was unauthorized.
So that means they were... So, at least by June, they had put out Budokan and Populous. So... By June, they definitely had the license.
Okay.
All right. So. All right. Well known for its sports games, Electronic Arts have been publishing the John Madden football series for 4 years. Did they? Like, was there?
No.
Yeah.
Wait. One more sentence, then we'll pounce.
Okay. We'll pounce. The first Madden football, released for the Apple II computer in 1986, was so successful.
There, we pounced.
What? Which
I
one's...
can't remember if we finally figured out it was 88 or 89, but it wasn't 86.
But, like, they insinuate
and
that
it was a failure on the Apple II.
And they weren't continuing to publish new Madden games after that.
No, exactly. This whole thing so successful, Electronic Arts began updating its and releasing on an annual basis. That hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, that waited till the console versions.
Exactly.
Electronic...
It's all horrible lies. Stop mistreating Hawkins razors.
That one's so big. I have to put that one in. That's not a matter of opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And they weren't doing annual updates. That's another one.
I'm just going to combine those two.
That's fine.
Electronic Arts President Trip Hawkins agreed to help, and his designers put an...
He was not the president. Larry
Yeah.
Probst was the president. He was the CEO. Wasn't presidential. He was very presidential.
And his designers put together a game that Sega could name Joe Montana Football and publish under its first-party label. The game was released in January 1990. Electronic Arts released a Genesis-compatible version of John Madden Football later that year, with more features.
That's right.
The finished versions of Joe Montana Football and John Madden Football were so completely different that few people would have guessed the same company had made them. John Madden Football featured a playbook partially designed by Madden himself. As an NFL broadcaster and former Raiders coach, Madden helped Electronic Arts designers create a game realistic enough to appeal to football purists. Joe Montana Football, on the other hand, was an arcade-style game that emphasized fast action over realism. Unlike John Madden Football, which had all 28 NFL teams, Joe Montana had a 16-team roster and a simplified playbook built around passing intensive offense that discouraged running plays.
I mean, it is Joe Montana football.
Yeah, that's just...
I do
not...
Football.
Yeah, I do not know much about Joe Montana, but I do know that he was an aggressive runner.
Yeah.
Although the Joe Montana series did not last as long as Madden games, it helped establish Sega's reputation among sports fans and Genesis as the leading video game platform for sports simulation. Electronic Arts developed only the first Joe Montana football game. Blue Sky, an independent development company, created Sega's later football games, founded by George Kish, who I need to talk to, who worked with Michael Katz at Coleco. Blue Sky went on to make several important Genesis hits, including World Series Baseball and Vector Man. I'm not sure Vector Man was a hit, but...
or an important.
Yeah.
But, that's...
It's a cool game, though.
So. Uh-huh.
There's cats.
Hold on. I'm a-coming. I think Joe Montana earned something like a $2.5 million or a $3.5 million royalty over the course of the 5 years of our agreement. The Japanese were originally concerned that he wouldn't even earn the money that we paid him in advance. I was gratified to hear that.
Of all the games Sega released in 1989, okay, we're just jumping back, all right? Michael Jackson's Moonwalker made the biggest impression on the media. Not only did the game contain synthesized versions of hits such as Smooth Criminal, Bad, Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller. It also had Jackson and chorus lines of villains dancing to choreographed moves that looked like they belonged on MTV. Sure, yeah, if you call that stiff animation worthy of MTV, all right. I mean, MTV did air Money for Nothing, so, I guess anything works for that.
When I was at Dragon Con the other year, there were 2 people cosplaying as the characters of the Money for Nothing video. It was great.
Yeah, they are hideous characters, but they are funny, hideous characters. Loosely based on the Jackson Moonwalker video. Video? It's a movie. The game followed Jackson as he explored pool halls, graveyards, and other secret hideouts in search of kidnapped children. Just as like the video, the game ended with Jackson turning into a robotic alter ego, which he battled a nefarious criminal named Mr. Big. Actor Joe Pesci played Mr. Big in the music video. The character in the video game was an excellent likeness. Okay, Kent. This is important. It's not a video.
I always thought to myself when watching Joe Pesci in anything, boy, that guy looks pixelated.
He's got enough blemishes for it. Sega's marketing team was led by Al Nilsson, who...
Nope. He was director of marketing for Genesis. He was never the VP of marketing and reported to Steve Race and then to Ed Folkwine.
Who constantly reminded the press that Jackson had added his own creative suggestions during the development of the game. I'm sure he did. Nilsson was a J.C. Penney buyer who handled video game orders during the late 1970s and early 80s. He already did this.
I already brought this up. An assistant buyer! As Dick Lehrberg loved to point out.
Jackson even released a statement saying that Genesis was the first game console that had enough power to handle his music. It's not entirely, but, he did the tracks for Sonic 3, so I guess they could handle his music.
Yes.
In this, however, the pop star was wrong. The first system powerful enough to handle his music was the Master System. Sega published an 8-bit version of Michael Jackson's Moonwalker as well, because they had the rights to do it, not because Jackson approved.
Yes, and because it was still important in Europe.
Sega of America may have slowed down its Master System marketing effort with the launch of the Genesis, but it did not abandon the retailers in the video game channel. Sega released Master System versions of such Genesis hits as Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, Ghouls and Ghosts, Golden Axe Columns, and even Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't an error strictly, because everything he says is true, but they were really doing that for the European market,
Yeah.
not for the US market.
It also released the Power Base Converter, a pricey adapter that allowed customers to play Master System cartridges on their Genesis consoles. Wasn't it like $50 or something like that?
Probably. When we announced the Nintendo deal, the stock went up. When we announced the Sega deal, the stock went down because the market was so ignorant about what was going to happen. Of course, by the end of that year, everybody realized that the wheels were falling off the 8-bit market, and we were getting punished for that. They still didn't appreciate the 16-bit systems. A lot of people from the period from 1989 to 1990 just assumed that Sega was not going to do anything.
I can feel you on the edge of breath as you try to continue that sentence endlessly. Electronic Arts' relationship with Sega produced significant rewards for both companies. Genesis quickly became a lucrative new outlet for Electronic Arts, and Sega benefited from having a line of sophisticated games that appealed to an older audience more than most games on the NES. Nintendo approached Electronic Arts about making games for the NES in the mid-1980s, long before Sega announced Genesis, but Hawkins did not want to make games for the 8-bit console. He and many other Electronic Arts board members felt that the NES was not powerful enough to run their computer games, and they did not want to downgrade their games to run on it. Like many people at the time, Hawkins was openly disdainful of console games and critical of Nintendo's chances of success. The difference was that Hawkins waited too long to change his mind. By the time he realized that Nintendo was going to succeed, Electronic Arts stock was tumbling, and the 8-bit market showed signs of aging.
We decided that Genesis would do really well and that we had very appropriate content for it. We did not want to be in this business the way it was currently being run, the way Nintendo did it with that one-sided licensing agreement, and Sega was trying to clone almost everything about Nintendo. I thought, look at what Atari is doing. They have reverse engineered the machine and are selling their own games. If Atari wins that lawsuit, that will open up the market, and you won't need to have one of those oppressive licensing agreements.
In 1989, Electronic Arts technicians successfully reverse-engineered both the NES and Genesis. And I talked to somebody who was involved in both, Mr. Mike Schwartz.
Yes, indeed.
Good man.
One of the main guys is sadly dead.
Yes.
Jim Nichols.
But he may not have done as much as previously reported. But that is a question of who did what. He said, she said, sort of thing.
We need to find Steve Hayes.
Yes.
Is what we need to do.
We do. Though the NES market was considerably larger and his company eventually released a few games for it, Hawkins felt that the Genesis was better built for his company's goals. Electronic Arts programmers were familiar with the 16-bit 68,000 processor, having worked with it while making games for the Atari ST, Commodore Amiga, and Apple Macintosh computers. Converting games to work on a Genesis also required less work since most popular computers had 16-bit processors at that time. Most? No. Only one obstacle remained, waiting to make sure that Sega did not change the architecture of its game console before releasing it in the United States. Hawkins was aware of the security chip Nintendo had added to the Famicom before shipping to the United States as the NES. When Genesis proved nearly identical to Mega Drive, he decided to move ahead with his plans.
We decided to go ahead and publish our own stuff on Genesis. Then before we did that, we went to Sega and said, look, before we embark on this path, maybe there's a way for us to work out a more reasonable arrangement, because these are my razors. So in June of 1990, we signed a very unusual and much more enlightened license agreement with Sega. Among other things, we had the right to make as many titles as we wanted. We could approve our own titles. There was not this sort of oppressive restriction on our rights of expression, and of course the royalty rates were a lot more reasonable. We also had more direct control over manufacturing.
Electronic Arts' first two Genesis games, Populous and Budokan the Martial Spirit, were released in June 1990. In August, Electronic Arts released a miniature golf simulation called Zany Golf. That fall, released the Genesis version of John Madden.
Yeah,
Football.
So those were released in June 1990, right? And Joe Montana was released in January 1990.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I forget where I read that. Obviously not Kent, but I'm pretty sure that had something to do with everybody playing nice with each other. Is that they realized that they could get Electronic Arts to do the game for them. At the time, we would be pretty happy if we released a computer game that sold 50,000 units. That was considered to be a significant milestone of success. That was not really true anymore
Yeah.
in 1990, but we thought, well, what would it take for us to sell 50,000 on the Genesis? We decided that if we had an install base of 500,000 units, we would be able to sell 50,000. After Madden came out, they probably reached 500,000 machines in North America, and by that time, we had probably sold well over 100,000 units. That was pretty healthy penetration. It just got better and better after that.
Being early on a
Hey, Dale's
platform.
back.
Dale, just in time to be
Yeah, you can be
Ken
Ken
Word.
Wirt.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll try one, but I'm on limited. I'm on limited
Fair
system.
enough.
All right, what do we got? I'm Ken Wood.
Yes.
I started at NEC in 1987. Within about 2 months, I got this call, and they said, "Hey, Next doing this new project in Japan. That's a video game system. We want you to check it out and think about whether you could introduce it in the U.S." It was ironic because I didn't go there having any thought of NEC doing anything in the video game space, and yet almost right away they started doing video games.
Sega was not the only company to release a new video game console in the United States in 1989. NEC, one of Japan's leading computer manufacturers, and Hudson Soft, a leading video game publisher, teamed up to enter the market with a system called the TurboGrafx 16. Hudson and NEC designed PC Engine, but a lot of it was Hudson's game experience because they were one of the top developers for the Nintendo Famicom. Hudson was a very colorful company. It was started by two brothers named the Kudo brothers. They were eccentric software entrepreneurs, and they grew up next to a railroad tracks on the island of Hokkaido, which is the northern island of Japan. In the very beginning, well, he got all that right, which is surprising. In the very beginning, TurboGrafx had a few small advantages over Genesis. NEC had a good reputation as a computer company and a strong name recognition among PC owners in Japan. TurboGrafx was also older than Genesis. NEC released it in Japan as the PC Engine a full year before announcing plans to ship it to the United States, and the launch was tremendously successful. More Japanese customers purchased PC Engines in 1988 than Famicom. And a small core group of U.S. video game enthusiasts had bought imported PC Engine for prices averaging approximately $500. All right, Alex, you want to give this one?
Yeah, I'm... Oh, that one. Sorry, I had been on something else. Yes. So, yeah, this is a complete error that is due to a misunderstanding. So, what was reported at the time is that the PC Engine in its first year on the market sold more units than the Famicom sold in its first year on the market. And that got garbled and confused by the Western press and Western authors, who thought that this meant that the PC Engine had outsold the Famicom head-to-head that year. But they were comparing it to its sales in 83-84. So that is wrong. We have market study research stuff that shows that the Famicom outsold the PC Engine. There was no point where the PC Engine was first.
And a small core group of U.S. video game enthusiasts had bought imported PC Engines for prices averaging approximately $500. Jesus Christ, the shipping costs back then.
Right.
That was not worth it, people.
That was no Amazon purchase.
American game magazines such as Electronic Gaming Monthly and Video Games and Computer Entertainment mentioned the console. In May 1989, NEC announced plans to release the system in the United States. NEC had some distinct disadvantages, too. Sega was an established arcade company, and American consumers knew the Sega name from the Master System and arcade games. Not many from the Master System, but okay, we'll go with it.
I had one friend who had a Master System. He also had a Rob. He was just the friend that had all the stuff.
And you played that Master System?
Once. I think we played a soccer game on it, if I recall correctly. We played it once. We only played the NES.
Some
Because
people
Master System.
Some people even remembered the tabletop games and the ColecoVision cartridges from the early 1980s. Yeah, some, but like...
Can't remembered, okay? Can't remembered.
Sega also had a stronger following among game enthusiasts. By the time the Mega Drive was released in Japan, it was a much bigger news in the US press than the PC Engine. NEC did not have to search very far to find an executive to handle the introduction of his new game console. Ken Wirt, who joined NEC's computer division a few months before the launch of the PC Engine, had spent more than a year as vice president of Atari's consumer computer division. As a vice president in Atari's consumer division. Recognizing the value of his past experience, executives at NEC headquarters in Japan sent Wirt their new console and some games and asked him to evaluate the system. His initial reaction was positive. They sent over some PC engines, and I checked it out. The quality was great. At the time, we were comparing it to the Nintendo Famicom and the Sega Master System, and it did an awful lot better than either of those did. It played faster, and the graphics were better, and it had some interesting styling. And the game cartridges were these little RC cards. I mean, it had a lot of interesting things going for it. Technologically, TurboGrafx was a curious hybrid of 8 and 16-bit technology. NEC's marketing department faithfully maintained that it had both a 16-bit graphics processor and a 16-bit central processor, but critics charged that both systems were built around 8-bit chips. TurboGrafx clearly lagged behind Genesis in overall power, though it could display far more colors on the screen. I forget what the dealio is, but whatever. TurboGrafx could play 241 colors at a time. Technically, Genesis could only display 61 colors at a time, though a method for displaying 128 colors was developed in later years. Alright, thanks. Thanks, Ken. Alright, you be Mr. Booger.
As I recall, TurboGrafx was a hybrid design of 8 and 16-bit technology. From a marketing standpoint, driving the idea that it was a 16-bit system was pretty important. From a marketing standpoint, that was a complicated story to tell. Of course, the competition wanted to tell the 8-bit part of the story, and NEC wanted to drive the 16-bit component of the story. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't a good idea to let that battle line be drawn, because neither side was 100% right. Perhaps telling a more sophisticated story would have been of more value.
Or you could have just released good games.
I mean...
Instead
you're not
of
a fan of Keith Courage in Alpha Zones.
Oh, man. Yeah, why that pig? I mean, I do know why, but like, it was a stupid decision from the off.
Yeah.
Instead of storing games in cartridges, NEC published its games on plastic cards that looked a lot like cards used on the Master System. I wonder why. Maybe because Sega ripped off Hudson on the MSX.
Yes.
But NEC's held a lot more data. I mean, they could have licensed it too. We don't actually know. But the game that came packaged with the system was a slow-paced side-scrolling adventure called Keith Courage in Alpha Zones that highlighted TurboGrafx' ability to display several colors.
Several? Such a thing has never been done.
In the future, however, TurboGrafx games would have the potential to be much larger than Sega games. NEC announced that it would release a CD-ROM...
size isn't everything. It's also how you use it, Nick.
Yes. It would release a CD-ROM add-on device called the TurboGrafx CD within a few months after the fall release of the console. CD-ROM discs could store nearly 260 times more data than TurboGrafx cards. And what did they use it mostly for? Music. Just Redbook audio. That's all they used it for.
I mean, the base system could already display several colors, so what more did you need?
I mean, the PC Engine's CD, or CD-ROM squared, I guess is the proper term. Soundtracks are pretty good. Like, if you want some good old school style music, look up the TurboGrafx library, because it's good. The console launched in New York and Los Angeles in late August, just 2 weeks after the launch of the Sega Genesis, and retailed for $199.
Sales back.
Take it
again.
Oh, I'm here. What do we got? It's
Word
Ken.
again.
Yes.
The video game business was hot at the time that we launched, and we had tons of orders from all the big retailers. Kmart, Walmart, Babbage's, everyone had these giant orders. We had a big introduction ceremony in New York in the original customs building. There must have been 200 press people at the thing, and it was covered on CNN. There was a big media splash about the introduction.
Unaffected and overconfident.
Now, did Kent really talk to Bob Harris? That's what I want to know. Or did this come from something else? Because it's like there's this tantalizing Bob Harris comment. I so wish I could find him, but that name is so generic.
I thought Nintendo screwed up 3 different times. One was being so late to bringing its 16-bit to counteract Genesis. Number 2 was not making Game Boy a color system a lot quicker to counteract not only our Game Gear, but also the Lynx. Yeah, how did that work?
Which is, of course, why the Game Gear and the Lynx just buried Game Boy for years.
Yeah.
Before they finally went to color.
Number 3.
Huge mistake. Huge.
Number 3 was not taking care of Mom and Dad by making a downwardly compatible component that accepted 8-bit software on the Super NES. It didn't have to enhance the software, just to accept it so Mom and Dad didn't complain about tossing $500 out the door on little Johnny's NES.
I mean,
With Mom and Dad.
I kept my NES
and
my SNES hooked up to my television.
They sold enough of those, so
like I continued to play my NES after I had an SNES. It's okay.
The executive team.
I did have a Super Game Boy.
The executive team at Nintendo greeted the news about Sega's Genesis and NEC's TurboGrafx with indifference. Looking back years later, several Nintendo employees have offered various explanations as to why they did not take Genesis seriously. Some people said that the first Genesis games did not leave an overwhelming impression. Others said that Japanese Mega Drive sales were so low that Genesis didn't seem like much of a threat. Several people admitted that since Nintendo had a US install base of over 20 million, Sega seemed like an upstart that Nintendo had beaten easily a few years earlier.
Who did Howard before?
You.
The other failing was this blind faith that since they were Nintendo and they were successful, no one could ever defeat them. That they worked so hard and had done so many things right and were given such positive acclaim from people and had made so many people in the industry wealthy that you just couldn't imagine them looking anywhere else because we'd made them so happy.
At the same time, Nintendo just passed new milestones and the business continued to expand. Nintendo's sales for the year topped $2.3 billion and the company's licensing program grew as well. Knowing that under terms of their agreement they could not publish more than 5 games a year, 2 licensees, Konami and Acclaim, asked for second licenses. This allowed Acclaim to publish 5 additional games as LGN, and Konami to publish its additional games as Ultra
So,
games.
yeah, I don't know that Acclaim... Konami did ask, because I have that story from, Emil Heidkamp. Acclaim, I don't know that they necessarily asked. I think they just, because they purchased LJN to get a second license. I mean, it's a different situation than, Konami and Ultra.
Oh, no, the story that you've told sounds to me like a covert ask,
Yeah, maybe.
Of, what's his name? One of the founders, sitting with Howard Lincoln. I was like, wow, yeah, this 5 games a year is really,
No, that was the Konami story. It's like, what would happen if somebody, founded a second company, released more games? And Howard Lincoln was like, I don't know, what would happen? That's the Konami story.
All right, then
I'm not sure Acclaim, asked. I think they just bought LJN and used the license.
I feel like they would have had to ask if Nintendo was going to do anything about it, but whatever.
Oh, but Ultra predates that, doesn't it?
I don't know.
I think so. I think Ultra predates the Acclaim purchase of LJN.
2 of the first games that Konami published under the Ultra label were exceptionally successful. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a game based on the comic book heroes that became a cartoon show and motion picture. Many motion pictures and many cartoon shows.
Yes.
And Metal Gear, a game about a soldier in a special forces operation. Yes, that's the interesting part about Metal Gear.
That's all it's about.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else.
I feel asleep. The big news around Nintendo in 1989 was the pending release of a new handheld game system. The first handheld video game to use interchangeable cartridges since Milton Bradley released Microvision in 1979. That is absolutely not true. There are quite a few in between the Microvision and the Game Boy.
Yeah.
That's I want to do a blog post about like the forgotten era of handheld games between like 1983.
Handheld and tabletop. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'll count them as handheld even if you can't hold them in your hand.
It's the same product category. I just usually qualify by saying handheld and tabletop.
Yeah. There are some interesting things in there. It's one of my favorite sections whenever I cover electronic games in my Mag Project series. I just love the weird electronic handhelds that came out. Named Game Boy, the new unit was designed by Gunpei Yokoi and Nintendo's Research and Development 1.
Since he put an "and" on there, we'll let it stand, but...
The team that created Game & Watch and designed the hardware for Donkey Kong. Yeah, we already covered the hardware.
Yeah, didn't design the hardware.
Yeah, he was a part of the development, yes.
That "and" the team saves that sentence.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, not that we could really blame Kent that much, but, you know. It's, you know.
I will never, after all this, honestly, I don't think I'll ever hear the name Kent without cringing. like real talk.
Kent.
That's fucked up.
We have taken the name through several swaths of mud at this point.
Oh no.
Typical of Yokoi's engineering, Game Boy was inexpensive, lightweight, and efficient. It was the same size as a calculator. Pretty bulky calculator.
It's the same size as maybe a big TI scientific calculator of the time.
Had stereo.
That was a bulky system. I remember the original Game Boy.
I do too. Had stereo sound, which was actually pretty impressive. But...
Yes, that was impressive.
They were going to call it the Game Yokoi.
And a black and white liquid crystal LCD screen. And it could run for 10 hours on 4 AA batteries. Though Game Boy was designed around an 8-bit processor, it was not compatible with the Nintendo Entertainment System, and its cartridges were only slightly bigger than a book of matches. Finally, a size... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I had a tangent thought. Did Gunpei Yokoi design any guns? Gun toys?
He did!
Oh, so he's Gunplay Yokoi.
There you go. He did. He designed the beam gun and stuff, so yeah. It's true. Yokoi was not alone in his interest in handheld games. Unaware that Yokoi was creating Game Boy in Japan, Rare Limited co-founder Chris Stamper built a handheld game system that played NES cartridges. When he completed the project, Stamper and Joel Hochberg, Rare's American partner, demonstrated the unit to Nintendo of America. Dale, are you here?
I got this. I got a doll.
Yeah.
We had no idea that Nintendo was working on a portable system when I arranged a meeting with Mr. Arakawa and Howard Lincoln to show them a portable system that we had developed that used NES carts. There were a number of problems, of course, such as battery life. It was cumbersome in comparison to what Game Boy in its final form actually looked like because it accepted a larger cartridge. Now, at my meeting with Howard and Mr. Arakawa, they took me into their confidence and told me about this Game Boy project and suggested that we forego any development of this project that we were working on.
I mean, it would have been stupid anyway, because the size of an NES cartridge and just like slamming that into the back of something and walking around with it, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. In a shrewd manner, Nintendo of America president Minoru Arakawa decided to use Tetris as the cartridge that came packed in with Game Boy. It was a perfect match. The puzzle game's simple graphics lent themselves well to a Game Boy's LCD screen, and its style was ideal for travel and quick breaks. The Tetris cartridge also fit into advertising campaigns that Nintendo ran in later years after discovering that the Game Boy had a stronger appeal to adults than the NES did. Nintendo originally released 3 cartridges, Baseball, Breakout, and Golf, that retailed for $20 at the time the Game Boy was launched. It's not Breakout. It's
Alleyway.
Yeah, Alleyway. I'm sure he had it described to him to someone else. Yeah, it's like Breakout.
Yeah,
But he
I mean,
forgot
it
the
is like
like.
Breakout, but yeah.
They did not get a license from Atari Games, who they were suing, to release a licensed Breakout on the Game Boy.
Right.
A few weeks later, Nintendo released the Game Boy cartridge Super Mario Land with a barrage of advertisements based on science fiction movies of the 1950s. What?
Yeah, I think they did, but I'd be skeptical if there was really a few week gap.
I think it is actually. Like, I believe that someone.
I've never researched it. I've never researched it.
Let me look here. Yeah, I believe that that is true. I think the reason they would have done that is just to give Tetris a little breathing room.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that it wasn't ready or anything. It was already out in Japan. It launched with that, but I think they just wanted to give some space. Though it had the look and feel of other Mario games, Super Mario Land took the plumber in new directions. In this game, he flew a spaceship and rode a submarine. Shigeru Miyamoto had not overseen the creation of the game. Yokoi produced it himself, specifically to support his Game Boy system. Was he the producer?
I mean, it was made by R&D 1, so he probably was the producer.
It was produced by Yokoi Okada, directed it, and Hirofumi Matsuoka designed it. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, design it. Well, it says designer and artist, so I guess Wikipedia actually separates out those things. So, unlike the other hardware systems that came out in 1989, Game Boy was an immediate success. According to an article in Time magazine, the 1 million Game Boys sent to the United States in 1989 met only half the demand for the product. That allotment sold out in a matter of weeks. Game Boy was a juggernaut. Its sales did not slow down even when it was confronted with a technologically superior product. Jay Miner, the man most associated with the design of the Atari 2600, founded Amiga in 1982. In 1983, he hired a young programmer named R.J. Michael, who had a fanatical passion for creating operating systems.
Did Miner hire him?
Michael's biggest claim to fame,
or did the head of, because Miner was like the head of the whole project, but then there was a head of hardware and a head of software,
but I feel like that would have come from Michael, so I don't know.
Well,
I'd have to ask him.
I have a feeling that I have a book called Commodore the Amiga Years.
Michael's biggest claim to fame at Williams was helping design the arcade game Sinistar. I'm not sure he designed it; he was just programming it, but.
Yeah, he was one of the programmers. He didn't design it.
Yeah. I'm getting my R.J. Michael impression ready because he has a very distinct way of speaking.
Yeah, you can do that one. I don't think the book specifically says who hired him. Yeah. It might have been Miner, but it just seems like he'd have probably been hired by, like, the head of software rather than by Miner. But that's a minor point. Get
out of here, Alex. Tall, athletically built. Athletic? He's like a stick. I don't know if that's athletic.
It depends on the sport, I guess.
And openly goofy, Michael was the antithesis of the standard programmer. Not really. Like, he's just silly. Like, whatever. Working under Miner, Michael learned a new appreciation for the relationship between hardware and software. everything I learned at college and everything I learned until going to Amiga suggested that hardware was hardware and software was software. And the way things are done is that you invent a bunch of hardware and give it to the software guys. There's a much better way of thinking I learned at Amiga. For the first time, the hardware and the software were created together. There was a great flow of communication, a mutual design coming into existence at the same time.
That is a man who has taken mind-expanding drugs.
I don't think he would deny that whatsoever. While working at Amiga, Michael struck up a friendship with a hardware guru named Dave Needle. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Both men shared the same yin and yang philosophy about the interrelationship of hardware and software. They both left Amiga in 1985. Needle took a job with Apple Computer, and Michael became an independent contractor. A few years later, however, while eating at a Mexican restaurant, they began discussing projects they could build together. The conversation turned to video game systems. Needle grabbed a napkin, and they sketched the basic plan for a handheld game system with stereo sound and color graphics. Michael and Needle originally planned to design their system around a 16-bit processing chip, but decided it was not a practical idea. The chips they looked at would have heat problems, and when they evaluated the components needed to support 16-bit processor, they decided the system would be bulky and heavy. They switched to an 18-bit 6502 chip from the same family of chips used in the NES and Atari 2600. And the Tamagotchi. Michael and Needle did not have the money needed to build and market a game system. I'm not sure they ever had the illusions that they did, but... So they began searching for a company that would buy their idea. They contacted Epix and demonstrated the idea towards the end of Michael Katz's tenure as president of the company. They did not know that Katz had urged the company's board of directors to accept the project. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think there's any truth to that. I don't know if that's something you got from Katz. If it is, I think Katz got confused.
Over the next...
There's no evidence that they were pitching this before Morse was there.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't make sense. Just go to Epix, just like if some random software company.
Yeah, well, and I have an article that profiles Morse, contemporaneous to these events, that seems to indicate that kind of the plan was that, get Morse there and then get the project there. That was the plan.
I've been trying to needle Michael through Zach. Yeah, so I feel like I'll eventually get to talk to him. So I'll put this in.
Yeah, and of course the thing with Michael is that he is, and he says this himself. He prefers a good story to the correct story. And he's admitted this himself. So he's not always perfectly reliable, sadly.
Yeah. But there's, I think that mainly manifests in anecdotes. I think if I press him on this point, I don't think he's gonna just make it up.
Yeah, I don't think he's deliberately dishonest, and I don't think he tries to toot his own horn at the expense of others or any of that kind of stuff. It's just, he likes to tell a tale, and so he'll embellish.
He tells tales similar to Peter Molyneux's tales about pissing in a can.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he's not deceptive. He's just a raconteur.
Over
it
the
is
next
called his story. Come on.
No, her story now, don't you know?
Uh-oh.
Don't you know?
Hey, I've been Midwesternized. Don't worry about it. Over the next few months, they entertained a lengthy and friendly negotiating process that ended with them accepting stock in Epix and taking positions with the company. They called their project.
Yeah, of course it was a friendly negotiating project when you've already planted your friend as the CEO of the company.
I'm not sure he knows the name David Morse.
Probably doesn't, but yeah, that was
the
whole thing.
The Katz had managed to keep Epix running. He was never able to completely solve its financial problems. I mean, this was a financial problem. This is what they would have been okay if they didn't do this. The company, needing financial backing in order to bring the new game system, invited several potential partners to view the handy game while it was under development. In 1988, Nintendo sent Don James to have a look. Someone from Epix contacted us and said, "Hey, we've got this thing, and do you guys want to look at it?" I don't think they actually offered it to us, but we found out and I flew down to have a look. I went down, they showed me what they were doing. It was really just a screen at that point. It was difficult to see the screen because it had faded out it faded in and out if you moved it around. You had to have it just at the right angle to see the screen really well.
Yeah, well, you should talk. I remember the original Game Boys, Don.
My personal thought was that because of that, and because it just chewed through batteries like crazy, it wouldn't ever really catch on. Nintendo sent somebody to look at what we were doing, but he didn't seem interested. It was like he came to see us even though he had already made up his mind, and he wasn't interested.
They took it to Japan, too. They showed it to NCL. Dave Needle told that story to Retro Gamer. Because he was there. I mean, it wasn't anecdotal.
Right.
Like, one of the board members said, "Hey, we're getting on a plane. Let's go." And so they flew to Japan.
But they were already working on Game Boy, so it's like...
Yes, and then they were they showed their thing, and then Nintendo actually let them see a prototype Game Boy. Not like test it out or anything, but just like brought it in and showed it to them. And they were like, "Oh." Well then.
Shit.
Well, I'm sure they still thought they had a leg up because theirs was
Well,
colored
yeah,
and
but
shit.
they knew that Nintendo could never be convinced to take their product on
Right.
at that point. That's all I mean.
So, it was good fair play for them to, show that they had it.
Mm-hmm.
Needle and Michael learned a new phrase while working on Handy Game. Imag Treshny. For them, the phrase became a sort of Murphy's Law. It meant that no matter how carefully you worked, and no matter how meticulously you checked every detail, something was bound to go wrong. In this particular case, the mistake occurred when Needle designed the Handy Game screen with engineers from Sharp Electronics. Needle and a Japanese engineer discussed every point in the design, but at some juncture they slipped on one-digit slot in the binary encoding, and instead of listing a 1, the engineer placed a 0. If you did...
Well, yeah, this. Have you ever heard of the great Imag Treshny?
Insert game.
He sounds like a hockey guy or something.
If you didn't have a game in the slot when you turned it on, the screen would display the message "Insert game." Because of the error, the message came out inverted. It said Imag Treshny. The Epix's financial problems increased through 1988, and the company ended up selling the Handy Game to Atari Corporation. Many of the employees at Epix resented the idea of working with Atari. Michael and Nita disliked the idea of working with Atari so much that they left Epix. They were never part of Epix, as far as I know. Right?
They may have been.
May-
I'm not
okay.
sure.
But a few months later, Epix collapsed.
Thank you.
I loved that. Epix was so good.
What's your favorite Epix game? Is it Temple of Apshai, the unplayable mess? Or...
you'd find the bad ones. I remember Epix was kind of like, I remember associating the brand with good in the same way that Activision managed to trigger that.
Really, Activision?
Yeah, Activision's branding was second to none on the 2600.
So you're like Tongue of the Fat Man, is what you're saying?
Yes.
I remember, I never, at that age, I didn't have a Commodore 64, but I knew some people who did, and I remember one of my friends had World Games, and I do remember playing World Games a fair amount over at their house.
Oh, the games branded, all of the games branded it for sure, but I'm trying to think, surely to God they had one great game other than the game series.
Pit Stop?
Impossible Mission?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Impossible Mission was awesome.
That one's pretty good. Atari changed the name of the system from Handy Game to Lynx to highlight the fact that up to 8 Lynx consoles could be daisy-chained together using Lynx link cables, and also probably the fact that they were just obsessed with big cats. So,
That's right.
I don't know when that started, but
Yeah, I don't know
was-
if Lynx or Panther came first.
Remember
But
the
it's-
Atari Ocelot?
maybe somewhere deep in the development files, there is
The memo
all
for
type.
The Atari Ocelot.
I mean, this was the only time they were clever, because Lynx
Right.
and linking cable. So maybe this was the first one, and they were just like, let's just keep with that branding. But
Exactly.
it was clever. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
The system
I
was
agree.
launched in October 1989 to rave reviews. Lynx was designed to accommodate both left and right-handed play, and it had one of the finest LCD screens of its time. The screens on the Game Boy and later handheld systems tended to blur when showing fast movements. I mean, it's complicated, but that's an actual, factor.
Right. Whether
But
that's
I'm pretty sure Lynx does have ghosting. I think that's something they fixed with the Lynx Model 2.
yeah. I
Link-
don't know the technical details of Lynx enough to.
Yeah. Lynx's screen handled speed without blurring, though it scratched very easily. The color graphics and a crisper screen were not enough, however. While Toys R Us and most of the dedicated video game stores carried Lynx, Atari could not give it the marketing and retail support that Nintendo gave Game Boy. Atari's poor reputation with retailers and fear of Nintendo causing many retailers to avoid the system. Originally retailing for $199, it cost twice as much as Game Boy and was never widely advertised. Many stores pulled Lynx from their shelves within a year. It was mostly available through mail order thereafter.
I like how Kent several times mentions how either Commodore or the Tremels or Atari have poor reputation with retailers, but he never actually explains why. He just states it as a given.
It is the Tremel curse. It's anti-Semitism. That's what it is.
Oh no.
All right, I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick, and we'll be right back.
Alrighty.